What's going on, workforce? Brian here.
Chris here.
And today, I think hopefully this will be the final chapter in this saga that we've been following along.
The trilogy.
The trilogy, the ideal set of videos in this case. But some valid criticism that we got, like on the last video, somebody coming into the
Yeah.
second post, wondering what the heck has been going on. They didn't catch the first thing. And so, Chris, why don't you go ahead and summarize what has led up to this point? Because Square Enix has officially responded, and then we'll jump to their response and discuss, is this enough? Does this fix the problem, etc. So, go ahead.
Right. So our first post was basically somebody had posted to Reddit a screenshot of a conversation they'd had with a GM, and the GM said, "Hey, I'm giving you a warning, a permanent warning on your account that'll never go away, for using Party Finder incorrectly. And what you've done is you've used the other tab of Party Finder for the purpose of finding RP groups, not ERP. Everybody seems to be assuming in the comments that all RP is ERP. That is not the case.
Right.
If any of you have ever played D&D.
And what's ERP? Because we've also seen people ask about that.
The E stands for erotic, so it means adult. It means 18 and up.
I keep thinking exotic.
Sure. It tends to take on a more adult nature, and that doesn't just mean foul language. That means many times a more sexual component. But there's plenty of people who just want to, they want to get in character. They want to enjoy the world. They want to be the warrior of light, speak in the proper sentences, not say, hey, can I find a group for this? It's, will somebody help me adventure in this way and fulfill my quest and things like that. And so that's a common part of the community. It's very well developed, and they were confused about that. And the community was like, hey, I think this is a bad read on the GM's portion. And the second post was the community coming back and saying, if you think that's a bad read, look at all these other things, right? So people are like, oh, well, this is this one time. And it's like, no, this is in a string of things since the change to terms of service, back when they kind of swung the pendulum and said it's time to police our own community tighter, where it feels like maybe there's been an overreach or misunderstanding, and it feels frustrating to the community because you see people over here breaking terms of service in a way that the community doesn't want, selling runs for real money, RMT, things like that are blatantly against terms. And then you see people over here who are just trying to play the game, and
a role-playing game,
in
and
reality,
God forbid
maybe
they
it's
are
one of these
role-playing.
guys getting banned for every 100 of these.
Yeah.
It feels frustrating when even one of these gets banned, when even one of these is still sitting on the very same Party Finder board right there. It's right there.
Yeah. And one actually interesting kind of thing people, like I saw somebody bring up that we weren't actually bringing solutions. And to them, I say, maybe we bring our solutions earlier in the video as opposed to kind of halfway, because it's like we tend to save all the best stuff at the 10-minute mark afterwards. So for those of you who stick around past 10 minutes, you know what I'm talking about. But the core of this is,
we gave away that car.
I know. Lunar whale mounts to the moon. But yeah, speaking of lunar whale mounts, guys, be sure to be lurking, because that's something that Chris has been working on for his streams. But anyway, the core of this, though, I'm going to kind of jump into what Square Enix has officially stated. And one of the things that's kind of leading up to this, especially as people come in, they're not aware of kind of the serious nature of this. There might be dismissive of the fact that it's just the RP community. Get those RPs out of here, which is weird because it's a role-playing game. And then essentially like, oh, this is not a non-issue, but then Square Enix actually stepping in and identifying this as a real issue.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of show off what they've stated here, and then we'll kind of break it down and give you guys our thoughts, especially as it relates to everything that's been going on this week alone. So this says, greetings everyone. Thank you for the patience. While we've reviewed the situation, in short, there was an internal miscommunication which led to accounts being issued basically incorrectly. We sincerely apologize for the concern that this has caused the community, as there has not been any change to our existing policy. And then, just on a note, I'm reading that two ways. We'll talk about that here in a second. And we want to be sure to assure players that our focus is not taking action against inappropriate advertisements and listings. We will work to ensure proper communication is being done with the GM team to strive to ensure quality service operations. And I've seen a lot of people, outside of what we've shown publicly, I've received a lot of messages from the community telling kind of their story in this, thanking us for that. I don't feel like I think this is just us being a part of the community, and I'm glad that we've been able to draw light. So thanks to everybody who shared their stories with me, and then also sharing their excitement that Square Enix has listened. And I think that was kind of the big thing that Chris and I talked about in our second video, is that they are an active listening team. Whether they end up ruling in our favor, like the solution is to raise our voice, to post on the forums. And I think the fact that there was so much unity behind this, which is really good to see within the community, outside of, there's always, you're never going to get 100%, right? But outside of that aspect, that this was definitely brought to their attention and it was addressed. The thing I want to talk about, I'm really curious to Chris's thoughts, is that the line, there has been no change to our existing policy, meaning I read this two ways. A, they didn't change that you could not, they didn't go from you can list into the other tab to you cannot, so there was no change there. But I also, in the negative way, that there has been no change to their existing policy. Warnings are still that indelible mark. Warnings are, forever. If you get a warning 7 years ago, and you do, and you get caught in this, guess what? 3-day ban, which is the first kind of step after kind of the warning phase. So,
and how far were these warnings forgiven, right? There were a number of people that said, this happened to me 3 months ago. This happened to me 2 years ago. Not every time that something gets handled, in a less than optimal way, is the community ready to post 67 Reddit posts, 250 billion Twitter things, a bunch of angry YouTubers. Like, that's not always there to highlight something.
Right.
And so are there still, because there was no policy change, how do we know moving forward that if we aren't here immediately to shine a spotlight on something, because there's other things going on at the time and we miss it, and not like just Brian and I, but us as a community, then how do we know? And they're saying they're working with the GMs and stuff for this one type of issue, but like, it was not just one. There was somebody who felt that, they didn't emote that much, but they were told that they were banned for emoting too much. Okay, well, how much is too much? And there was no warning in game, and they were immediately given a 3-day suspension and no warning. Like, that's the sort of thing where, like, given context, of course, like, that can be really alarming. So I would say that, the pessimist in me still wants to say, like, okay, like, that's, you didn't fully address it, but the optimist in me says, like, this is why we love this game. This was a fast response.
Yeah.
This shows they listen. This shows they care. For people who said, why are we just blowing this up? This is a tiny bit of validation saying, hey, Square, I thought this was bad too. So are you saying that they're blowing this up into a thing bigger than it is? So it was kind of like, this is why
it's good. It feels good to be a part of it.
Why we play this game. This is why, even when they get it wrong, I played the game 6 hours today on stream, and then I turned around and played it off stream while lurking in someone else's stream. This is why I did a bonus stream last night where I lurked to do Housing Savage. This is why we play this game. We love this game. I filmed a post earlier today that let out some of my frustrations at kind of the dichotomy of that you can love a game and want it to be better. They're not mutually exclusive. You don't have to, it's not, you're not allowed to critique it from outside, but you're not, if you critique it from inside, why aren't you playing something else? And it's like, well, which is it? And so I think the thing I want to address, and turn back to you, Brian, is there were a couple comments that I think were unrelated to this, but that I'm not saying are not valid points. They were just about something else entirely. This was, hey, we're assuming this is condoned activity. It just isn't condoned as a party finder listing. They weren't saying they couldn't RP. And there were people saying, well, there's 16-year-olds that play this game. We have to protect them, keeping in mind, like, and so, like, do you have anything to say, like, how, like, is there anything you read about, like, maybe as a community, we just don't understand RP?
So I think essentially, obviously, there is a natural connection to connect RP with ERP. I think essentially that was a big kind of story a couple years ago. And yes, like, as a community, if someone is doing something like lewd in a public space, the game is rated T for teen. So it's like, okay, let's look at that. Let's talk about the rating. Now, the ESRB cannot rate online interactions by individuals, and they state that numerous times. So the game isn't therefore rated teen. It's rated for however, and that's for any online game. So as a right,
old man in My Little Pony things and those conversations,
Barone is
very adult.
Yes. And so the question then, and like I even did like a video on this on a parent's guide. Like, is Final Fantasy XIV safe for kids? And like, all depends on the circles and the interactions you have. You could say, is Netflix safe for kids? Is YouTube safe for kids? The answer is no. Like, those aren't, and in the general connotation, I put myself in this category. Netflix is not my babysitter for my children. Same thing for YouTube. Same thing for a video game. But I am actively involved in those things, and so I can either see, I can direct, and things like that. I have no problem with the RP community or the ERP community. I just think everything revolves and needs to exist in its own lane in that regards. Would I let Maddie run around and visit random strangers' houses? No. But I'm aware of that, and I'm fortunate because I'm educated on the game itself, and I feel like that's a part of something I can offer the community itself, and that's why I started that additional channel, Parents Guide, is to kind of break down things that are going on in these video games, talk about them in a non-judgmental way, but in a straight up informative way possible. Advertising within Party Finder, within the other tab, seems completely reasonable. I'm happy that Square Enix looked into this, but I don't think what they've done is actually address a core issue that I have with the whole process, and it's that indelible mark of a warning is permanent, and that stack, meaning like it only seems to punish you the more you play the game, which is a general fear that a lot of veterans have. The game tends
it's not a big deal now. It's a big deal 5 years from now when you accidentally step across another line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
both times were just accidents. Both times could have been a misread by the GM, but now we've entered a very different scenario.
And the next time, imagine it's just, because the next time could be happening tomorrow and the next day, unless it bubbles up and actually taps into a community that then is able to go and get movement behind it, you end up just kind of feeling lost and isolated. And I think essentially, hopefully this allows them to bring this into kind of a bigger conversation. How can we improve those communications? They put out really good communications in terms of RMT banning and things like that. Here's what we found. Here's what the actions that were taken, in the system and the community. What I hope for this, and I think what we can do from a content creator's perspective, I think what we can do from a Reddit community perspective and a total community perspective, is that there's times in which that we get to sit down and talk and ask Yoshi P and the team questions. And I think maybe this should be a question for them regarding kind of these policies, and would they consider removing the indelible mark after whatever, just kind of bringing that up into the leadership team. And this is just something that should be talked about on the forums. It should be something that is talked about in general. It doesn't have to, thankfully, be the beating drum. If this wasn't addressed, my concern level would definitely continue to rise. Being that it is addressed makes me feel secure in the trust that I give them. But this is also showing a flaw in the system that hopefully we can start to work to hammer out and figure out what's a good way forward. Hopefully that somewhat addresses your question, because there's so much stuff that's subjective.
There was a lot of other side conversations that spun off of this that were very valid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just weren't necessarily on topic, and so they're they end up kind of becoming videos or topics of their own and threads of their own, and many of you were having intense debate. So from here, I hope that, at least for the people affected, I hope this is good news. I hope that they all had their warnings lifted. That way, the next time they're banned for something totally different, maybe they emote too much, maybe they, accidentally AFK in a dungeon, and that for some reason says GM says you're not supposed to do that, and that's against the spirit of the game. I don't know what all the number of things we heard about people receiving warnings for was pretty large, and it's only alarming because those warnings are permanent and cumulative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's only warning because it's only scary because how many of those little it's no big deals does it take before you're catching a 3-day suspension?
Yeah.
Or worse, right? There's longer suspensions available. It's not, it doesn't, 3 days not it. And it does seem to escalate, but but if you let the little things go, then when something does happen, right, what do you do from there? I had a friend that had his account hacked in a game, and that person went off to go troll a bunch of people, and then their account was banned, and the company in question of that game said, we can help you recover your account, but the ban's going to stay. And so then he had to wait out this ban. And so if that were to happen inside Final Fantasy XIV, how frustrating would that be? And what if that length of that ban was set because you didn't say anything about the 2 warnings you got years prior that were for nothing?
Mm-hmm. You're like, okay, I'm just gonna do the warning, and
so that's why they're a big deal.
So anyway, that's I think this is a positive conclusion.
Great
to obviously the story of the week within the Final Fantasy XIV community, and ideally this is a good talking point, a good community point that we can start to look at and have this discussion, more freely, especially, without worrying about. And the only thing I really had was those who were discounting it because it's the RP community. Like that's the only thread in here that I go, they're gonna come for you at some point, and I hope that
What if it's
right?
If it's people soloing extremes next,
Right.
that's not in the spirit of the game.
Yeah.
What if it's PvPers next, right?
Yeah.
And a few of you are already going, well, I don't care about either of those things. Okay,
Yeah.
well, whatever your thing
Yeah.
is, whatever your thing is that only 10% of the population does, what if it's that?
The
next?
crafting community say no crafting parties. Don't list that. What if it's that? And that's the hope is that we don't obviously get there. That's the hope that this is just an example for discussion as opposed to like a real world scenario that we would face. But I hope that as a community, we all look out for each other in this regard. So like what affects us all, like even if it doesn't affect you directly, affects us all. And that's the part of MMO, massively multiplayer, massively multi-opinion, in that regard. So those are my thoughts. I really am happy that we get to make this video as opposed to having to come back next week and be like, well, like this apparently is still an issue. So thank you again to everybody who's reached out. You guys, I'm sorry that y'all had to go through this chaos. I'm excited with the result. If you aren't, you can always message me, let me know. We can have more discussions about that offline in that regard. So I always really do engage as much as I can with you guys. But Chris, you got any final thoughts before we wrap up for today?
No. We're streaming on Twitch, and for those of you that haven't been hanging out, we are now doing a couple of rounds of kind of mid rolls throughout the day. But the mid rolls are when I take a stretching break. So you're just looking at a chair stream anyway, and those mid roll revenue is going to buy lunar whales. So those of you that come in and watch an ad, it's exciting to see people come in and be excited about what ad they got, because we are taking that revenue and we are rolling it into
Lunar whales.
A pile of money that hopefully buys more than one lunar whale. We don't have a price on that, so like we're just gonna earn what we can from mid rolls.
I think right now we're up to like $3 or $4, so it's like yes.
Yeah, right now right now lunar whales have to be pretty cheap, but we got a lot of time between now and May 14th. So
and assuming
you guys
the
raised
whale
it to
doesn't
another
drop
level. They started, Brian, I don't know if you were there for that, but they realized if they make me hydrate, I have to take a third break throughout the day, and the third break triggers more ads, which is more lunar whale. So
to the
thank
moon,
you guys.
To the moon.
Always coming up with a way to surprise us.
LWE to the moon.
To the moon.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. For Work to Game, my name's Brian.
My name's Chris.
Hopefully you have a fantastic day, and we hope to see you next time. But until then,
take care.